Thank you so much for having me here. I hope I'm loud and clear. And I'll try to take you. So there were a lot of jargons that you would hear: impact investing, changing the world, sustainable development goals. I'm a forester, so I actually don't understand any of them. I'll make things very simple and try to take you away from the jargons, but to the core of what we are trying to do. World has 7 billion people. Most of the world actually, which comprises what's happened in Singapore, is focused on the top 4 billion. Largely on the top 1 billion, but a significant amount lately has been focused on the top 4 billion. You do a business, you try to sell something to somebody, and that's essentially that person must have the money to buy that. And the larger amount of money that person has, the more money you will make. And that's how businesses are run. As time has passed, what you see is a lot of more people, a lot more business is focused there, and therefore you keep ignoring those who are at the base of the pyramid, who don't have the capital to actually attract your attention, which means you create an exclusion. These people are as human, as aspirational as you and I are. Unfortunately, or fortunately, this was fine till the time communication boom did not take place. What communication boom did was essentially made the same very poor, excluded, marginalized people see the same television that you see here in Singapore, which essentially meant that there are two pyramids now. One is called the pyramid of aspiration, which is flat. That means what your children believe that they deserve is what the children of those who are marginally and excluded also believe they deserve. The moment aspiration pyramid is flat, the expectations are the same. You want to live in you want to drive a Mercedes-Benz, they also want to drive a Mercedes-Benz. You want to send your children to the best Ivy League colleges, they also want to send their children to the best Ivy League colleges because they see, feel, and believe in the same destiny for themselves. The challenge is the resource pyramid still exists. And if you continue to have these two pyramids, what will lead to is chaos, because those who will not get it will take it from you forcefully. And that's why conflicts take place. And therefore, it is in your interest and my interest and everybody's interest that we start actually taking care of the other 3 billion who are not part of the 7 billion. That is actually a whole humanity. So the idea of impact investing essentially is nothing but trying to convince the money to deal with the aspirations of the other 3 billion. That's essentially what, in a nutshell, impact investing is. It is to make your future safe. And that's why it should be of interest to everybody and anywhere in the world to participate in it. Now, I will try to actually take you through a quiz. It's not a difficult one. Entrepreneurship normally takes place from here. So there are some questions here. Can't find a cab. Can you actually guess a company that came out looking for this? Uber. See how bright you are. Where do I find a budget hotels to stay? Airbnb. Okay, so that means you guys are very, very smart, right? But the next slide is a little difficult, and we'll try to find out if you can figure out any entrepreneurs who actually, any companies that actually emerged from here. So those were just, I thought people will actually be finding it very difficult for the first slide because those were just animations. And these are very live pictures. It's difficult actually because these are things that you see every day if you're in an emerging economy. So if you're in India, if you're in Africa, you see this every day. And because you see it every day, you actually don't feel or associate with it as strongly. So what's the difference? The difference in the first and the second is, the first one is actually driven or emerging out of a person's individual environment. So my personal need drives me to come up with a solution, and I'm able to attract capital. It's normally coming from somebody who's very capable, very talented, is actually solving a problem that is associated with the individual, while the other set of problems were actually not emerging from a personal individual challenge. It's a complex social problem. It's not a problem that you can actually not ignore and live. So you can ignore, live, and go on. It is unrelated to entrepreneurs' personal environment, because it doesn't need to be a poor person living in a slum to actually solve that problem. So if I'm a rich guy and I don't live in a slum and I don't face this, I can have my car glasses go up and I can simply ignore it and live with it. And this requires much higher level of quality in terms of thinking and capability to create value out of it. And this is really why not many bright people want to go and do this, because it's much more harder, much more difficult. I'll quickly actually try to take you through one or two examples. Now, if you see this, do you see an opportunity here? It's a brilliant opportunity. 65 million tons of waste is produced in India every day. 65 million tons. 15 million tons of that is dry waste. That dry waste goes into a landfill. In India, it has actually become a Mount Everest now. So the landfill is complete. It's going up now. Now, there are consequences of this, but most of us who are rich can ignore those consequences. The poor suffer these consequences. What can you do? Can you actually convert this into wealth? If you can convert this into wealth, you can actually build a multi-billion-dollar enterprise in a very short period of time. But unfortunately, people are trying to actually make a multi-billion-dollar enterprise looking for a cab rather than solving a real problem. Anyway, what do? We actually try to create these entrepreneurs. So and I'm trying to give you a context which is not really it's a non-African context, and then I'll switch over to why this is relevant for Africa. So in 2013, we actually realized these mountains are growing too high, and waste is not a problem, as you can see, about actually just looking ugly or dirty. It's actually a health, contamination, water. It's a very complex problem. So if you don't get rid of it, you will actually create more and more problem. So we met two young guys who actually figured out a way of recycling waste that can create significant value. We gave them $500,000. They tried to actually professionalize themselves. Ultimately, they were dealing with rag pickers who are actually the poorest of the poor, trying to create wealth. And then, as happens with all good causes, a fire struck and everything that we invested in got destroyed. It also actually gave us an inspiration that if you are actually going to invest small amounts of money to change the world, you are going to get this as an outcome. The learning is, if you want to change a significant complex social problem, you've got to put in a very large amount of capital, not a very small amount of capital. So we went back. The entrepreneurs were convinced they have the capability and potential to build something up. They actually then, with some more capital and support from us, launched something which essentially went from 500 kgs of waste recycling to 100 tons per day. And this all happened in 2.5 years. We went from 100 kgs or 500 kgs to 100 tons per day. This is the first automated high-end recycling plant where we actually clean up those landfills and generate value. For every 100 ton, you generate $15 million of revenue. The EBITDA is 15%. The net PAT is 8%. So this is quite a rich thing. Now, 3 months back, this company only had 100 tons of production facility. And we did a calculation and said if 15 million ton is produced per day, 100 ton doesn't solve anything. So I was actually having a discussion with the entrepreneur, and we said, if you have to really be significant, you should be operating at 50,000 tons per day. And if you operate at 50,000 tons per day and $15 million is the revenue per 100 tons, you can do the mathematics and see where you're heading. 3 months back, these guys actually got into the newspaper, and suddenly the municipal commissioners in India in different parts started visiting this plant. And in last 45 days, they have been asked to actually up their capacity from 100 tons to 5,000 tons they're getting, and that may go up to 50,000 tons. So a company which actually does a $15 million turnover right now might become $1 billion in 2.5 years from now, depending on their capability. Of course, there are execution challenges, but they have built everything up. That's how fast you can build very large, multi-billion companies while solving a very social and complex problem. If you find good entrepreneurs, if you can actually relate to the challenges society face, and in the process, you are actually going to change the life of not 1, 200, 30,000 to 100,000 people would actually be working in this, whose livelihoods will be generated. They will move away from doing rag picking, which is the worst of the job, to actually into professional environment where their lives, health, and everything else will be saved, and a consistent revenue to be generated. AgroStar is another company which essentially, I'm just giving you two quick examples. Farmers in India or anywhere in the world actually are always struggling to survive. I don't know how many of you know, but in the United States, which is a very developed country, the number of farmers committing suicide every year is higher than the veterans returning from Afghanistan and Iraq. That means doing agriculture is riskier than actually going and fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's the kind of risk that happens. And this is actually an open secret. Everybody knows it. And US is a very developed economy and massively subsidized agriculture. Does this happen in India? It happens in India as well. The challenge is India faces, farmers face unique challenges. If you are actually trying, so India is a monsoonal climate, rains come in, all farmers want to buy seeds. And what I call a black t-shirt problem, that if everybody in Singapore wants to buy a black t-shirt, what will happen? The price of black t-shirt will go up. So if every farmer in India is trying to buy a seed, the price of seed goes up. More worse, you won't get the seed. And it happens because monsoon in India comes at a certain time, so everybody is buying the same thing. These guys came up with a solution. How do you actually deliver what farmers want at their doorstep? Effectively build an Amazon for farmers. And what we have done is, over the last 3.5, 4 years, has gone from just an idea to a company which has been invested by multiple people. We started with $500,000, and this company is actually right now valued above $100 million in 4 years from zero. Hopefully would be the first unicorn coming out of India trying to solve an impact investing problem. Long story short, what we have been trying to do in impact investing is identifying entrepreneurs who are focused on the challenges that people face at the lower income strata and convert them into very large opportunities. Why is this relevant to Africa? Africa has all the same challenges any emerging market has. India has the same challenge. Africa has the same challenge. We have actually realized, I personally, I'm a forester by training. I started in 2001. My whole goal was not to change the world, but to find a way to actually take capital to entrepreneurs who are trying to build these businesses. That's essentially what I was trying to do. I had a very large sum of personal money, $100, and an aspiration to actually take that to build these companies. And I was 29 years old, and I had no idea where finance starts and where it ends. For me, F meant forest, not finance. And I landed up in this country in Singapore in 2001. That was my first trip outside India, looking for money. 50 Indians met me in one gathering and asked me, what do you want to do? I told them, you give me your money and I'll return it back while changing the world. I don't think so anybody in the room believed, but they collectively decided to give me $100,000. This is all 2001. I went and started this fund called Avishkar and struggled my way to $1 million in 2005. My aspiration with my $100 was to reach $1 million because I thought that is a very large sum of money, and I will be able to change the country. When I reached 2005 and $1 million, I had invested in 6 companies, and all the 6 companies were bankrupt. It started dawning to me, $1 million is a very small amount of money. It also very clearly emerged to me there was something seriously wrong in the way I was thinking. I was a nice guy who was trying to change the world, and I was working therefore with nice people. Nice guy trying to help nice people to change the world is geometric progression problem. You are actually doing everything in square proposition. I reflected back and said, I need to change myself first. I need to ask myself, what is it I'm doing? It clearly emerged to me that you are trying to create a business, and therefore I must be dealing with business people and not really good people. Does not mean business people are bad, just that they are very focused on what they are trying to achieve. The second thing is, if you are trying to make an impact, is impact the input or is impact the outcome? I realized impact is the outcome. Exactly like in venture capital, returns is an outcome. The input is identifying a great entrepreneur with a great idea, and your job is to provide them risk capital so that they can build this business up. In case you do these 3 things, chances are you will make a lot of money. That chance is what is called risk. And my job was in impact investing is identify an idea that has significant amount of impact inbuilt in the business model that essentially is focused on making money. And if I identify a great entrepreneur with a great idea and give them a large quantum of capital, chances are they will make huge impact and hopefully will make a lot of money. And that's essentially what I started doing post 2005. My million became 14 million and 30 million and 100, 200, 300. Right now, we are close to $800 million in all assets under management. Hopefully, I was hoping that we'll reach $1 billion, but then rupee dollar actually slid in different manner. So while I'll be $1 billion at 65 rupees a dollar exchange rate, but at 72, I'll be falling short of the billion. 2013, we decided to land up in Africa. Not because I was very bright. A lot of people were asking us to go out of India. We first actually started investing in Indonesia, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. But we also put in a compass on the map and actually looked at where all can we go, where there is high density of poverty and there is an ability to build a business. And if you look at within 6 hours, you get Indonesia on one side and East Africa on the other side. So we moved on Jakarta on one side and Nairobi on the other. And as I said, somebody asked me in Africa, so why did you come to East Africa? I said I actually divided Africa in 4 parts. Living in India, you always think of Africa as a single country. Once you land there, you realize there are way more countries than you think of. And they are very distinct and different like India is. So when we landed up there, we realized there is east, west, north, south. North is francophone. I really do not speak French. So we ignored French. Then we actually looked at South, felt that South Africa doesn't need us. Then it was left between East and West. East was closer, West was further. So it was not a very intelligent decision to be in the East of Africa. We realized and learned in our experiences of doing business in India that the challenges of emerging economies, whether in India or Africa or Southeast Asia, are the same. There are a large number of people at the base of the pyramid who are excluded. There are entrepreneurs who want to solve those problems. The missing link is capital. But the unfortunate reality is even if you provide significant amount of capital, you will not be able to make a difference. What you need to do is actually provide capital along with ecosystem support. An ecosystem means you need to connect the unconnected. And that actually is one of the most important things that we as Aavishkaar do. Not only do we go in very early and try to build the businesses, not only do we actually try to provide the capital, but we also go and look at what we call half-completed bridges. For example, if you go in Nairobi, you will see a large number of conferences taking place. If you go to Nairobi, you will also see a large number of incubators and accelerators. But if you go and ask yourself how many of those incubators, accelerators are actually producing scalable solutions that are delivering 100 million, 200 million, 300 million revenue, you would be struggling to find even one. To me, that is actually a challenge that can be solved only if you look at it from a strategic point of view, rather than just trying to throw a large amount of money by flying in and randomly looking and selecting an entrepreneur and giving them money. The other challenge we noticed in Africa was there is a large number of expat entrepreneurs. That means well-meaning good people flying from different parts of the world, actually going to Africa and trying to solve African problems. The big problem with that approach is, howsoever good you are, howsoever well-meaning you are, you will actually land up there, create a company in 3, 5, 7 years, and then fly back and relocate from where you come from. Essentially, which means the person whose idea and inspiration was actually is not leading the company, which is continuously leading to failures. And these are some of the challenges that we noticed. For that, what you'll have to do is create capacity locally. It's not that people are not smart locally. It is just that because there is a skill-talent gap, the best and the brightest of Africa are much more interested in doing high-paying jobs, and therefore are not finding the lucrativeness in the entrepreneurial side, and which is what is actually creating opportunities for expats to come and create companies. So how do you actually take capital that can inspire those who are best and the brightest, but getting very high salaries, to give up what they are actually getting and start companies is what we are trying to do in Africa. Our strategy has generally been to create companies rather than invest in companies, and that's actually another uniqueness that we bring to the table. So when we went to Africa, we realized that there are a large number of these expat entrepreneurs to which every investor chases because they speak the language that we understand. We cannot ignore that. We will continue to do it. So with this new fund that we have gone there, we are actually working with some of these expat entrepreneurs. We will actually give them money, do exactly what other funds are doing. But at the same time, we are actually looking at Africans who are working in very strong positions, convincing them to step down, take a significant stake in a business, and we will provide them the know-how and the capital to build a business. The risk of capital will be with us, but if they are successful, the ownership will give them much more wealth than they will ever generate with the $500,000 salary that they are earning. That's essentially what we are trying to do to bridge the talent gap. The third thing we are doing is, as I told you, the problems that I mentioned, the waste problem, the agriculture problem, the last mile delivery problems, they're exactly the same in India and Africa. We have already created 60 companies in India and Southeast Asia. Some of these thought processes can actually be taken as they are in India and Africa, as in India to Africa. And then you can actually help these entrepreneurs develop these, contextualize this, make it local, and build scale. All the three things are possible. What you need is capital and support, and that's what we are trying to provide. Long story short, and the more interesting part of this whole thing is 193 governments of the world have come together to agree to a term called Sustainable Development Goals. Now, Sustainable Development Goals essentially stand up and talk about reimagining the world as we have never seen. Since the time Homo sapiens became human beings, we have seen poverty, inequity, injustice, lack of food, water, sanitation exist all through. That means human beings have never seen Earth rid of any of these problems ever. Governments are not supposed to be risk-taking, but this time, under the aegis of United Nations, all the governments have signed up to a goal that is unthinkable. By 2030, the world expects to have no poverty, no hunger. That's one of the most ambitious goals humanity has ever signed up to. You require $2 trillion of investment every year for impact investing to play a role in this business. Now, this goal was signed in 2015. We are already in 2018. That means we have lost 3 years. We have 12 years to actually change the world and reimagine it like you have never seen, never heard. What is happening in this process is large amount of pressure is being piled up on the $200 trillion of global capital to allocate a significant percentage to this change. You may not be aware of it, but if you would have heard lately, you might have heard of a fund called TPG Rise. You might have heard of Bain Impact Investing. There is no reason why asset managers launch impact investing if they do not see large pools of capital making shifts. So those people who are here, there will be a massive allocation of capital coming sooner or rather than later, because this change has to be happening in next 12 years. If you are an entrepreneur and if you are African and you want to go back, this is the time to become an entrepreneur. If you have an idea that can change your continent, this is the time to take the risk and step forward. I am actually here to tell you this story because this is what we need. We need talented people who want to actually build and change their own countries and their own societies. There is going to be no dearth of capital. And there is no dearth of ideas. You can have your own original idea or you can borrow one. It doesn't matter. If you are good at execution, you will be able to create scale, you will be able to create impact, and in the process generate significant wealth for you and your investor. And that's the story I wanted to tell you. I'll stop here. We can have an interaction going forward. I know time is limited and you may have questions, but I'm happy to actually engage in any questions. Thank you so much.